Barry Horowitz. If you're a wrestling fan, you've probably heard the name. For decades, he was known as the guy who patted himself on the back, literally. Barry was a wrestler with a unique legacy. He was what the industry calls a jobber, someone whose role is to lose matches and make the bigger stars look good. But there's so much more to Barry's story than just his losing streak. Over his 22-year career, mostly in WWE and WCW, Barry wasn't afraid to speak his mind and do other crazy things. Let's take a closer look at the life and career of Barry Horowitz, his battles in the ring, his outspoken nature, and the controversies that made him a wrestling figure worth talking about. Let's get into it. Barry didn't become a famous wrestler overnight. He didn't start in those huge stadiums with bright lights and thousands of screaming fans. Nope, like most wrestlers, he started small. Imagine small gyms or local halls filled with people who loved wrestling just as much as he did. That's where he learned the ropes, back in 1979 in Florida.
It wasn't easy. He had to work really hard to get good. He practiced his moves over and over, and slowly, people started to notice him. He started making a name for himself. One place where Barry really started to shine was in a group called the Global Wrestling Federation, or GWF. He was a fast and skilled wrestler, and he even won their light heavyweight championship 2 times. That's like a super important prize for wrestlers in that group. This proved that Barry had what it took to be a star. But even though he was doing well, Barry dreamed of something bigger. He dreamed of wrestling in the WWE, the biggest wrestling show in the world. And guess what? He made it. When he first got to the WWE, his job was to make the already famous wrestlers look even better. This meant he had to lose to them. It might not sound like much fun, but it's a really important job in wrestling. It's how new wrestlers learn and how the superstars become even more popular. Barry was great at it, but he knew he had even more to give to the world of wrestling. Despite his hard work and dedication, Barry often felt like WWE didn't appreciate him. Over the years, he spoke openly about feeling overlooked. One story he's shared is about a biographical video WWE filmed about him, but never released. Barry was excited about the project, but when it was shelved, he took it as a sign that the company didn't value his contributions. This feeling of being underappreciated stayed with Barry throughout his career. While he knew his role as a jobber was important, he felt like the people in charge didn't see his worth the way fans and some of his peers did. Now let's get into some of his controversies. One of his biggest feuds was with the Ultimate Warrior. The Ultimate Warrior was a very popular wrestler in the late 80s and early 90s. He was known for his crazy energy, face paint, and loud promos. Lots of fans loved him, but Barry didn't like him very much. Barry thought Warrior wasn't a very good wrestler. He said that Warrior only got popular because of how he looked and acted, not because he was good in the ring. He even said that once Warrior's entrance music stopped, the match was basically over because Warrior didn't know what to do. Barry said these things after Warrior had died, which made some wrestling fans angry. They thought it was mean to say bad things about someone who couldn't defend himself. But Barry and Warrior wrestled many times, and Barry lost every single match. Maybe he was still upset about that, or maybe he just didn't like Warrior's personality. Warrior was known for being difficult to work with, so maybe they didn't get along backstage either. Whatever the reason, Barry clearly didn't like the Ultimate Warrior. Now here's a more lukewarm controversy. In the mid-90s, Barry decided to add something new to his wrestling persona. He started to include his Jewish heritage in his act. He began using the traditional Jewish song Hava Nagila as his entrance music, and he wore a Star of David on his wrestling trunks. Barry thought this was a fun and unique way to stand out from other wrestlers and connect with Jewish fans. However, not everyone liked this new gimmick. Some people felt that it relied too much on Jewish stereotypes and could be seen as offensive. Wrestling has a history of sometimes portraying different cultures in ways that aren't very sensitive, and some people felt that Barry's gimmick was part of this problem. Despite the criticism, Barry was proud of his Jewish heritage and didn't think he was doing anything wrong. He saw it as a way to celebrate his identity and connect with fans who shared his background. He continued to use the gimmick for many years, and it became a big part of his wrestling persona. But Barry's controversies weren't just limited to other wrestlers. He also had issues with wrestling promoters. One time, Barry was supposed to go to a wrestling convention in Albany, New York. He was going to meet fans and sign autographs. But when he got there, the promoter acted like they didn't even know who Barry was. This was really strange because the promoter was the one who had invited Barry to the event in the first place. Barry was frustrated by this. He felt like the promoter was being disrespectful and didn't care about him because he wasn't a famous wrestler. This kind of thing happens sometimes, where promoters didn't treat all wrestlers the same way. They were nicer to the big stars and sometimes ignored the wrestlers who weren't as popular. Barry didn't want this to happen anymore, so he decided to make some rules about how he worked with promoters. He told them that they had to be nice to him and treat him fairly. He also made sure that they paid him the right amount of money for his time. Barry knew he deserved to be respected, even if he wasn't the biggest star in wrestling. And what I think should be really considered unfair is how he is still not in the Hall of Fame. It's nothing but distasteful. Overall, Barry may not have been a famous champion like Hulk Hogan or Randy Savage, but he showed everyone that working hard and loving what you do is important. He was proud of his job and never gave up, even when things were tough. He showed everyone that you can be successful and leave your mark, even if you don't always win. Barry's story is one of perseverance and pride. He embraced his role, connected with fans, and stood up for himself in an industry that often overlooked him. He showed that even in a tough business like wrestling, it's important to be true to yourself and stand up for what you believe in. Now, for the real ones, here's a quick rundown of his epic career. Barry Horowitz was born in St. Petersburg, Florida, on March 24, 1959. Even as a young boy, Barry was a real bundle of energy. He absolutely loved sports and anything that meant he could be active and get stronger. Of all the sports he tried, he was really drawn to bodybuilding and wrestling. He loved pumping iron in the gym to build his muscles, and he also loved the challenge of wrestling. He was so good at both of them that he became a star athlete in high school. After graduating, Barry decided to go to Florida State University. College was tough, but Barry never gave up on his passion for sports. He kept working out and training, getting even stronger and more skilled. All that time he spent wrestling in his younger years turned out to be really important for Barry. It gave him a strong base for when he decided to become a professional wrestler. He got to train with a legendary wrestler named Boris Malenko, who was like a wrestling superhero. Boris taught Barry all the secrets of the wrestling world, from the technical moves to how to entertain the crowd and put on a great show. Barry took all of that to heart and used it to become a successful and well-known wrestler himself. Barry started his wrestling career in the late 1970s. Back then, he wrestled in small shows all over the country. He wasn't famous yet, but he was working hard and getting really good at wrestling. People liked watching him because he was so skilled and exciting. In the 1980s, Barry started wrestling in bigger places like Florida. He wrestled for different companies and even got to be a bad guy in the wrestling shows. Sometimes wrestlers pretend to be mean or nasty to make the matches more exciting. In 1987, Barry got a big break. He joined the WWF, which was the biggest wrestling company in the world. At first, he used a fake name, Jack Hart, but it didn't last long. Soon, everyone knew him as Barry Horowitz. Even though Barry often lost his matches, he was still an important part of the show. He was what they call an enhancement talent. That means he was really good at making other wrestlers look even better when they beat him. But even though he lost, people still loved Barry because he was so talented and fun to watch. He always had cool moves and a lot of personality. In the 1990s, Barry Horowitz became a household name thanks to his trademark gimmick of patting himself on the back after a match. It was a small but endearing gesture that resonated with fans and made him memorable even when he was on the losing end of matches. Horowitz's most notable moment came in 1995 during his rivalry with Chris Candido, who wrestled under the name Skip as part of the Body Donnas. In what remains one of WWE's most iconic upsets, Barry Horowitz defeated Candido on an episode of WWF Superstars. The victory was shocking because Horowitz was often positioned as an underdog, and this win made him an instant fan favorite. It led to a series of rematches and gave Barry a brief but well-deserved time in the spotlight. For fans, Horowitz symbolized perseverance and the idea that even the underdog could triumph. His popularity surged, and he became a beloved figure in the mid-card roster. He even went on to have matches at major pay-per-view events, further cementing his legacy as a hard-working wrestler. But in the late 1990s, the world of wrestling started to change. The WWF wanted to have really famous wrestlers with big personalities, like Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Rock. Wrestling became less about the sport itself and more about exciting stories and drama. It was called the Attitude Era, and it was all about being cool and edgy. This made it harder for wrestlers like Barry, who were really good at the older style of wrestling, to get noticed. Barry left the WWF and tried wrestling in a few other places. He even wrestled for another big company called WCW, and he also wrestled in some smaller shows. He was still a talented wrestler, but he just didn't get as many chances to show everyone how good he was. The kind of wrestling he was best at wasn't as popular anymore. By the early 2000s, Barry wasn't really wrestling much anymore. He had spent most of his career helping other wrestlers look good, which meant he didn't win a lot of championships or become a huge star. It was hard for him to become as famous as some of the other wrestlers from his time. Even though he was a great wrestler, he was never really the main attraction. Barry Horowitz officially retired from professional wrestling in the mid-2000s, though he occasionally made appearances at wrestling conventions and special events. After hanging up his boots, he shifted his focus to other ventures, including personal training and motivational speaking. His experience in wrestling and fitness provided a strong foundation for these pursuits. In recent years, Horowitz has remained active within the wrestling community, occasionally giving interviews and sharing stories about his time in the ring. He's also been a regular guest at fan conventions, where he is warmly received by longtime fans who remember his contributions to the sport. Today, Barry Horowitz lives a quiet life in Florida. He has embraced his role as a mentor and elder statesman in the wrestling world, often offering advice to young wrestlers who look up to him as an example of resilience and professionalism. While he no longer competes, Horowitz stays connected to wrestling through social media and appearances at wrestling-related events. Horowitz also occasionally makes guest appearances on podcasts and YouTube channels, where he discusses the highs and lows of his career. Despite never reaching the heights of wrestling superstardom, Barry takes pride in the respect he's earned from peers and fans alike. Barry Horowitz's legacy is that of an unsung hero. He may not have won world championships or headlined WrestleMania, but his contributions to the industry are undeniable. He was a dependable performer who gave his all, helping elevate the stars of his time while carving out a niche for himself as a fan favorite. Wrestlers like Barry Horowitz remind us that professional wrestling isn't just about the main eventers. It's also about the hardworking individuals who show up night after night, doing their part to make the product entertaining. Barry's story is one of determination, humility, and an unwavering love for the sport. And that's the story of Barry Horowitz, the underdog who became a legend in his own right. His career is a testament to the power of perseverance and the importance of playing your role to the fullest, no matter the spotlight. So next time you find yourself in need of a little encouragement, remember Barry Horowitz and give yourself a well-deserved pat on the back. If you enjoyed this look into the life of a WWE veteran, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more wrestling history and stories. See you in the next video.